One of the things we know is that there's the immediate effect of distressing events and such as bushfires, but then there's also the longer term effects. And one of the questions might be, at what point would we think a child should be okay? And what we know is that for each child it's going to be a slightly different journey, but we might think if things haven't changed and it's been now maybe 6 weeks since the event and the child is showing the same levels of distress, it's probably a sign that they may need some additional help. Most children, if they're provided with a safe and secure environment and they're provided with a daily routine which provides a lot of safety and security, they will slowly start to overcome some of the distress they may have shown initially. So in terms of thinking of how do we know things are improving for any particular child, of course we have to know at a sense of what's the baseline for this child to be able to make that determination. And so for each child it will be slightly different, but the natural things we would be looking for would be that would have less of the anxiety type driven behaviours, because if a child feels safe and secure, they won't need to be going up to the grown-ups and asking 10,000 questions about different things. In terms of their play, they may have shown aspects of the distress that they experience through their play, and it could be that if they're still caught in the same loop of doing the same play activity again and again, it's a sign that things haven't moved forward. Conversely, if we're seeing a change in that, like they're not preoccupied by the event, they've moved back to everyday life. Again, it's a very positive sign. So one of the key things to look for would be the degree to which a child is preoccupied by the recent events. The more preoccupied they are, the more distressed they probably are. The more they're just involved in everyday play, the more positive it looks.
So one of the things that we say when we're supporting children is to be really vigilant around changes in behaviour. But if we don't know children well, we don't know what to compare what their normal behaviour or interactions like. And within early child education and care, we always prioritise the importance of developing high quality relationships with families. And at no time is it more important than at the beginning of the year when children are transitioning to preschool for the very first time. You know, fall back on your experiences, you know what transition times look like, and you have a pretty good understanding of how long it takes for a child to actually engage with their environment, to move on from separation anxiety. So look, and if you see that it's extended for a significant period of time, it's time to talk to parents and find out what children's normal types of interactions are like. With children's poor communication skills, often we see their understanding and emotions manifested in different ways. And probably one of the real insights that we have as early childhood educators is to really observe children's play. Because play tells us how children are experiencing things, but it also gives us some understanding of how they're processing or moving on from a traumatic event. So it's not unusual for children who are quite stressed to engage in what we call repetitious or traumatic play, where they relive the event again and again. So we might see it coming out in their drawings, or we might see it coming out in their play experiences. So for example, there was a child a number of years ago who was quite traumatised by what happened at September 11th and the destruction of the Twin Towers. And we found over a 12-month period that this child continued to build the Twin Towers out of Lego and knock them down with planes. So as educators, it's quite normal for children to engage in play, but when that play extends over an extended period of time, or it starts impacting on their engagement with other children, that's really a cause for concern.
Well, for us here at preschool, I think to know that we're sort of moving forward with progress with the child, hugely important is the relationship with the children and their families. So I guess for us, that's always a good indicator, like to see how your actual relationship is developing, whether you are actually getting somewhere in that relationship, whether you can actually hold a conversation with the child or the family or both, hopefully. And then I guess from there, once you're feeling like you're making ground, it's just a continual roll on. Like it feels for us, I think, that we just make little friends. Like we just...
we talked about if the child was experiencing, say, separation distress, we look at the, we hope, hopefully if we're moving in the right direction, is the distress will become less frequent, less intense, and the duration of it will last for a less amount of time, and that we'll be able to kind of bring them back to calm, or bring them back to repair more quickly.
Yes, I think sometimes things can be alarming. I think when you first getting to know a child or a family, and I guess some things are perhaps more typical for a child in their situation that you might sort of first think, oh, you're not quite sure about. And perhaps talking to the families and getting to know the family and the background and the children's likes and dislikes too can come into it. And often the parents can give us some little tips and tricks about what is typical for the child, or some things that might, you know, make the child a little bit anxious, and we can work with that. And
if we're experiencing a situation where we feel like the distress or the child's not engaging to a point where our strategies are not working, or we feel like they're bigger than what we can deal with, it's time to be pulling the big guns, I think, isn't it, Jo? Like, we have referred to people like OTs and speechies, and even psychologists through Centacare has been a really good go-to. And sometimes we definitely don't mention names, but we say, we're dealing with this. Can you help us out with that? We did have, after the fire, we had an OT and a speech program, so the preschool invested money in having an OT and a speechy work here, didn't they, Jo? And that was fabulously helpful. Yeah. So they worked as holistically with a group, and they'd be able to say, oh, in this situation, this is what I would do in that situation. But they'd also be able to say, do you know, I think this child, or I think if we're experiencing that probably needs further assessment.
Yes.